Thank you for listening to Liberty Christian Center's podcast. Let's join guest ministers David and Tracy Holland for this year's marriage retreat.
Good morning. I'm so glad you came back. People coming back is my primary love language. People showing up. So did you do your homework assignment? If you didn't already know your primary love language, do you feel like you know it now? And do you know your spouse's primary love language? It's an important understanding. It's hard to overstate how important it is. I mentioned last night that whenever I came across Gary Chapman's book, Dr. Gary Chapman and the Five Love Languages book, it was like discovering something that decoded something that had long been encrypted. I've got email coming in. It's something that made something that was somewhat mysterious make sense. It was a key that unlocked things. That happens from time to time with a paradigm. Years ago, before germ theory, before there was an understanding of microbes, of bacteria and viral microbes, disease was quite a bit of a mystery. People really didn't understand why disease happened and why it spread. There was a lot of bad theories. There was a lot of misunderstanding. There was a lot of bad treatment of disease. But then all of a sudden, when the theory of germ theory became known and widely accepted, all of a sudden everything made sense. You could understand why things happened the way they happened, and you could take steps to prevent disease, and you could take steps to stop the spread of disease. But it required a paradigm that explained accurately what was going on. The love languages paradigm is a lot like that. There have been, for years, a lot of people extremely frustrated in marriage and couldn't really understand why. There was a disease in Christian marriages, in Christian marriages of people who love God and really, really loved each other. But the disease was the frustration of unmet needs. And if you understand that everybody carries a primary way, we all love all five of the love languages, as I mentioned last night. But if you understand that everybody's carrying a specific way in which it's their default mode to perceive love being expressed to them and also to give love, it makes a lot of things make sense and can help eliminate the disease of frustration in marriage. Over the years, Tracy and I have done a lot of pre-marriage counseling of engaged couples. Mentioned yesterday, we did a wedding last week where I officiated. We did the pre-marriage counseling. It's something we've done on many occasions. And it's true that if there's only one thing we could help a couple that's about to get married understand, if there was only one understanding, if there was only one piece of information we could give a married couple that would help them have success in marriage, I think it's this love languages paradigm. I think if they can understand that, and the things we're going to unpack here in just a moment, it will eliminate a significant amount of stress, a significant amount of frustration. Because the fact of the matter is that two people very much in love can be saying, I love you, in the way that they're wired to say, I love you. And they can be saying it as hard as they possibly can. And they can be saying it as passionately as they possibly can. And the other person cannot be perceiving it. It's possible that the other person is not perceiving that expressed love, and they can feel unloved. Two people loving each other can be in a relationship and feel utterly unloved. It's a crazy thing, but it's true. It's absolutely true. If you have a man whose primary love language, for example, is acts of service, and you have a woman whose primary love language is words of affirmation, say, and her husband loves her desperately. So he's expressing love to her in the way he's wired to express it, which is just serving her socks off. He makes sure her oil's changed in the car regularly. The brakes are always good. The house is always repaired. If there's a broken hinge on the cabinet and she complains about the broken hinge, by the next weekend that hinge is fixed. He's serving her, and in his mind and in his heart, all of those acts of service are expressing to her, I love you. But she is primarily wired to hear I love you by words, by, honey, I really appreciate you. Honey, you're doing a great job. Honey, you're so special to me. Nobody's more important than you. She's never hearing any of that. Nothing like that ever comes out of her mouth. She can feel completely unloved. And he, on the other hand, she can be constantly just expressing, honey, you're so great. You're the best husband. I think you're awesome. I love you so much. And those words, he appreciates those words, but they are not filling and expressing to him love in the way that he is wired to hear and feel love. And then if, for example, he's got a button missing on one of his shirts, and he needed her to pick up something at the dry cleaners, and there are several things where he's not feeling. There were some acts of service that would have been natural things for him to do, and those things aren't done. He's not feeling loved, even though she's feeling love and she's expressing it in the way that she's designed to express it, that's natural for her. You can have two people in a marriage and it's like one speaks English and one speaks Mandarin Chinese, and they're talking at each other like crazy. They're talking loud and they're talking often, but no communication is happening. No transfers of information. There's no deposits of knowledge or being transferred because they're speaking two different languages. And that happens all the time. All the time. Two people speaking different languages can feel unloved and frustrated. Words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, receiving gifts, acts of service. So now that you know what yours is and what your spouse's is, let's just explore each of those just really briefly so we really understand what we're talking about. Words of affirmation are pretty self-explanatory. I'm a words of affirmation guy. And so there's just they're life to me. And as I'm aware of the words of affirmation love language now, I'm constantly aware of the way that's my default way of expressing any kind of affection or any kind of affirmation, not only to my spouse, who I love desperately, but to my kids and to my coworkers. This love language paradigm has tremendous utility for you as parents, if you're still raising children. There's a whole realm of wisdom and insight and strategy that this brings to you when you're raising children. If you understand, if you can identify it pretty early on what a child's primary love language is. A child, 2-year-old, whose primary love language is quality time. Quality time is fed by your undivided attention, giving undivided attention and receiving undivided attention. And you can have a 2-year-old on your lap, and if they're trying to talk to you and you're kind of distracted, you're doing that thing that you do with 2-year-olds, that they never stop talking. And you're just like going, yeah, sure, and you're kind of also looking at your book or looking at the television. That 2-year-old will take your face in his or her hands and turn your face to him and say, here, right here, this is where I want you, right here. Your undivided attention is what I need. And a child who's, every child likes to receive gifts, but you can tell one of our kids. Early on, we knew her primary love language was giving and receiving gifts. And it's not that all of our kids got excited when they received gifts, but there was a level of anticipation. There was a level of intensity about the receiving gifts from one of our children. And then as soon as she got old enough, She was the one who was saying, Dad, Mom's birthday is coming up, right? What are you planning? What are you doing? What's the plan for Christmas? What's our plan? She was always wanting to know because she was always looking forward to the next gift-giving opportunity, and she wanted to not only have her plan, she wanted to make sure I had a plan as well. She was the one who when giving a gift, would put lots of thought, lots of introspection, lots of processing into making sure that the exact right gift was selected for the exact right person at the exact right occasion. With your kids, the primary love language has a huge amount to do with your discipline strategy. I think those of you who have had multiple kids understand that the same approach to discipline and correction and training doesn't work with every kid. Everyone that comes out of the womb is different. And you cannot approach discipline and correction the exact same way and be effective and have it work for you. You discovered that. Well, the fact of the matter is that your kids' primary love language will sensitize them to certain kinds of correction. And the fact of the matter is that if you've got a kid whose primary love language is quality time, you probably want to be cautious and judicious about using the "I'm sending you to your room and isolating you" form of punishment, because the last thing a Christian parent wants to do in delivering discipline and correction is to send the "I don't love you" message. It's the opposite of what you want to send. You're qualified to discipline and correct a child if the child's love tank is full. Obviously, the biblical and a primary way of correcting a child is spanking, and a little swat on the wrist or a swat on the bottom. When a child is young and about to touch something that's dangerous or run into a street is a very biblical, very valid and proper form of correction and training. However, if you've got a child whose primary love language is physical touch, we had one of those. She was a cuddler from day one. I mean, she was the one who, she really, really wanted to be a cuddler and snuggle in there. And to this day is really, really just wants to hug and be hugged and touch, is a very touchy, feely girl. So with her, we understood ultimately that spanking was going to have an impact on her that was much deeper, much more significant, much more it was a much, much bigger deal for her to get spanked than it was for her sisters. We had one, we'd spank her and she'd just get mad. She just, it just made her angry. She had a strong will, but with the other one, spanking was just this huge, psychically, soulishly impacting thing. So, all that to say, love languages paradigm. Very, very useful where your parenting is concerned, and not just in your marriage. And in the workplace as well. If you're supervising or you're managing, if you're trying to motivate employees, I tell you, you are miles ahead in the game. As a supervisor, as a trainer, as a sales manager, if you understand what the people that your team members' primary love language is concerned, because a words of affirmation guy is going to bloom with praise and recognition, and will basically, you can demotivate them like crazy with public criticism. You can absolutely drain them of all motivation. If you're trying to motivate somebody whose primary love language is giving and receiving gifts, some sort of reward incentive program is exactly the ticket for them, and so forth and so on. The other piece of the primary love language paradigm that Gary Chapman brought is the concept of the love tank. And this is something that we've all intuitively known, is that basically if you're speaking your spouse's primary love language, you're basically filling a tank, a reservoir that they're carrying around in their heart. Because other things from time to time are going to drain that tank. You're making deposits in an account. There's equity that you're creating when you're speaking your spouse's primary love language, because life will drain it. your mistakes, when you get into the flesh from time to time, you just mess up. All of those things have the tendency to drain those deposits out of that account, to drain that love tank down. So what you want to do is always be refilling your spouse's tank. And the way to fill that tank is to speak his or her primary love language, whatever it is. If you're married to somebody whose physical touch is their primary love language, just the pats, the hugs, the squeezes, again, and a lot of this is non-sexual touch. We talked about, sexual affection versus non-sexual affection last night. But there can be a sexual component to that as well for a physical touch person. But just the constant or consistent affection expressed are deposits into the love tank of somebody who has physical touch as their primary love language. I mentioned that I'm a words of affirmation, but my bride is a quality time girl. That became very clear to me early on in our relationship before I even knew the framework or had the vocabulary of love languages to define what I was seeing. But what I saw was her is, I had jobs that took me on the road from time to time, sometimes 2-3 days at a time. There were periods of time where sometimes I was on the other side of the world for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And I knew, and I discovered quickly, that when we'd been apart, when we'd been absent, she hadn't had my presence or my undivided attention for an extended period of time. Her love tank was bone dry. And I could just sense and feel the lack of rootedness and the absence of just feeling loved on her part, the security of feeling loved. And this is doubly impactful when you're talking about a woman who her top mega need is feeling secure in her husband's sacrificial love, right? So I learned early on that even if I've just been in a season of 3 or 4 days where it's work all day, some sort of meeting or event or something going on at night, and we may have even been together doing things together, but I have learned to sense when her love tank is really low, and 15 minutes of my undivided attention, I've learned makes all the difference in the world. 15, 20 minutes of my undivided attention, where basically I'm just call a timeout for everything else that's going on, and it's all about you. What's going on in your world? Unpack it for me. What's happening? What's going on with this project? And I will just figuratively, like that 2 or 3 year old child, take my own face and turn it to her face and say, "You right now have my undivided attention, and really for as long as you need it." And 15 or 20 minutes has this love tank that got drained over the course of days can be topped back off again in a period of just a few minutes. It's an amazing thing. But it's true with whatever your spouse's primary love language is. If it's acts of service, and you're a words of affirmation person, or you're a giving and receiving gifts person, then your spouse is only going to feel as completely and utterly loved as you want them to feel, and you need them to feel, is if you're finding ways to meet their service needs, finding ways in little ways. The little acts of service to an acts of service person speak volumes, and a couple little things can just absolutely top that reservoir off. The same is true, or there's a corollary, a counterpart to the fact that things that fill your spouse's love tank up, they have an opposite counterpart that tends to just drain it. You can drain that tank rapidly with the antimatter to the matter of your spouse's love language. Clearly, if you're a words of affirmation person, criticism or insults are basically just devastating. There are some people who just kind of have their personality is just sort of a caustic, sort of, insult. They're just a walking insult comic, and it's just their natural way of doing things, and they don't mean anything by it. But if your personality is just to kind of be that verbally caustic, verbally pokey person, and you're talking to a person whose primary love language is words of affirmation, you may not mean a thing about it. It may be completely harmless, completely innocent, but you're draining their love tank. Quality time, withdrawal. Basically, if you deny your spouse your presence and they're a quality time person, or if just life just takes you away, it may not be an intentional thing at all, but you can be basically, you can reward or punish your spouse if you want to put a negative cycle, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. If you want to initiate a negative downward spiral cycle in your relationship, in your marriage, and in your home, then use your spouse's primary love language as a reward and punishment mechanism instead of being sacrificial. Physical touch, distance can be the opposite of physical touch. You just not expressing that physical affection, not choosing to do so. There's another extreme for that. I mean, just physical violence, hitting. It's not okay to hit. And that's a problem in a lot of places in this country. And even sometimes women are hitters. Men are the stereotypical hitters, and there's a reason for that. A lot of men are broken in ways that we talked about last night, and so have anger problems and can be hitters. Well, obviously, but some women have a violent streak as well. So if your spouse's primary love language is physical touch, the worst thing you could possibly ever do is hit them. Receiving gifts, one subtle way that if your spouse's primary love language is receiving gifts, if you're just kind of spending on yourself, if you kind of get into a mode where if you're both working and you both have walking around money and you both sort of have budgets for your personal stuff and your personal wants, it'd be very easy to get into a mode where, she'll buy her stuff and I buy my stuff, and we keep to a budget, but she's responsible for getting her stuff and I'm responsible for stuff I want. Well, if you get into that mode and you're married to somebody whose primary love language is giving gifts, then basically you're denying them the very thing that makes them feel most loved. So spending on self would be a way to do that, or just simply forgetting, just forgetting key events, forgetting key gift-giving events. There are women who don't care anything about giving or receiving gifts. They don't care about Valentine's Day. They don't care about anniversaries. They don't care about their birthday. I'm sure those women exist somewhere. I haven't met one yet, but I know they're out there. But the fact of the matter is there are some women and many men who those occasions mean everything. The fact that you remembered and you thought about them. But it's not just the compulsory dates that are important. It's the surprises. Those are the ones that speak volumes. Where I was thinking about you today. I saw this little thing. I thought that this would bless you. I thought that this would delight you, so I got it for you. When it comes out of the blue, what you've done is you've spoken volumes about your love for somebody with that love language. So what does it take? What does it take to speak your spouse's love language when it's not your natural language? By the way, I should mention, it is possible to marry someone who has your primary love language. Opposites do attract, but you can be opposite in lots of other ways and have the same love language. Talked to these guys last night, the Greenwalds, and they were talking about the fact that they have the same primary love language, and that happens. My mom and dad had the exact same love language. It was they were both acts of service people, and this made the success of their marriage make sense to me whenever I had this revelation. They were married for 55 years. Dad passed away a few years ago. But both of them, neither one of them were verbally expressive people of love. Neither one of them were physically affectionate. As a matter of fact, we had a stable, good Christian home. My parents provided a great environment for us to grow up in. But they seemed to be violating a lot of the rules, it seemed to me, for a long time, of good marriage principles, because they didn't express verbal affection to one another. They didn't express physical affection to one another. They didn't, make a big deal over gifts to one another. And then, so at one point I thought, how does this marriage work? Why has this marriage been so successful over the years? And then I had the revelation. They both had a very, very strong, dominant love language of acts of service. And they spent 55 years serving each other's socks off, and both felt perfectly loved and both felt perfectly secure in each other's love. Because it worked for them. It worked for them only because they were both speaking the same language that came natural to them. So it was a happy accident that they were speaking the same language, because they weren't walking in the light. In that generation, they weren't walking in some of the light that we have about this kind of thing. But it was interesting growing up in that household. And again, they were great parents, and I'm grateful for them. But what if you're a words of affirmation kid? Growing up in a household whose parents are acts of service people. Again, I look back on my childhood, and I can just see incidents after incidents, day after day after day. My parents were expressing to me and my siblings that they loved us by serving us. But I don't ever remember the thing that was water to my thirsty soul, which was words of affirmation. Expressed love. If I'd been affection, if physical touch had been my primary love language, I would have been in trouble too, because that's just not how they rolled. That's just not how they were wired to speak, and they didn't know to speak any other kind of language. They didn't know to do it any different. They were doing the best they could with the light that they had. But I grew up with basically absolutely starved for any sense of affirmation, verbal affirmation from my parents. It's interesting, though, Dad's last few years were marked by a decline, a cognitive decline from Alzheimer's. And I thought about them when we said we were going to theme this conference Better Together. Because Dad's decline, he was a college professor. Both my parents were college professors at a small college in Oklahoma. And his decline was verbal, basically. He lost the first signs that he had Alzheimer's or whatever cognitive thing that was going on with him was that he was robbed of his nouns. There were just lots of drawers in his vocabulary filing cabinet that would get stuck, and he couldn't get them open. So he couldn't come up with the words that he was looking for. And then there were the other things like confusion and disorientation, and other things came. But the first thing to go for him was his ability to speak. My mom is, and to this day, is very, very mentally sharp, but she's physically a mess, and mobility is a real problem for her. So in those last few years before Dad got really bad, he would drive and carry the stuff, and Mom would navigate and make sure that they didn't get lost, and they would do everything together. They did everything together, and when I would go home to check on them, I would give them a hard time. I'd say, between the two of you, you make one functioning adult. You have to stay together. Right now, you guys only work as a pair. You only work as a couple. My dad, I was up there for one of those visits at one point, and my dad walked me outside. I was going, and at this point, just saying whole sentences, verbally expressing himself was extremely difficult. And he walked me out into the yard, and he got tears in his eyes, and he was struggling and struggled and managed to ultimately say, "Son, I'm really proud of. I just want you to know I'm proud of you." And I'd never heard those words before. He never, those words had never come out of my father's mouth. I didn't really doubt that was true. I'd never really ever doubted that he wasn't proud of the things that I'd accomplished and that the man that I'd become. But it was cool to hear it. And in his mind, he was learning almost too late, that it's important to choose the love language, to choose to speak the love language of the person that you love. And not just assume that they're hearing what you're trying to say in your natural language. So what does it take? What does it take to choose to speak your spouse's love language? First and foremost, and primarily, it takes unselfishness. When I speak to young people today about getting married and getting the prospect of getting married and finding the person that they're going to spend the rest of their life with, I say that the primary skill that you need to be successful in marriage and to enjoy everything that God wants marriage to bring to you as a person is the capacity for unselfishness. If you have the capacity for unselfishness and you're married to somebody with the capacity for unselfishness, you are 80% of the way to having a great marriage. That's really the fundamental thing. And if any people on the face of the earth should have the capacity for unselfishness, it's God's people. It's the people of the one who gave his only son. And those of us who have those 4 needs met that I was talking about last night. We've been accepted. We have identity. We have security in him. So it requires unselfishness. It also requires sacrifice. To speak the language that doesn't come natural to you requires sacrifice. You have to basically do something that's less comfortable for you because it's more comfortable for the person you love. So it kind of goes hand in hand with unselfishness, but it is a sacrifice. And the third thing it takes is intentionality. You have to just be intentional about it. You have to think about it. You cannot be thoughtless. You have to be mindful that you're in love with and married to and joined in partnership, a lifetime partnership with somebody who speaks a different language than you do, if they do indeed speak a different language than you. And just be intentional and say to yourself, when I get up in the morning and when you have those interactions throughout the day, that mindfulness that this person that I love speaks a different language than I do, so I'm going to shift over into their language. And I'm going to choose to do so and be intentional about it. When God puts 2 people together like that, who speak different languages, but are willing to sacrifice, willing to be unselfish, willing to be intentional about it, you have something very special and very powerful. We're different in the sense that we're male and female. We talked about that last night. We're different in that we have different primary love languages, very possibly, very likely. And we're also different in another way. We're different in temperament and personality. And, once again, opposites tend to attract. There's a ton of different models out there for that kind of measure personality and temperament. You're probably familiar with some of them. There's the Myers-Briggs temperament personality profile. There's the DISC, D-I-S-C temperament profile. How many of you have ever taken one of these personality tests, temperament profiles? They're popular in the workplace and they're very, very useful. And they're helpful in navigating both marriage, the marriage relationship, and again, parenting, and in the workplace, if you understand it. Let me just give you just a 30,000-foot overview of the DISC temperament personality profile, because it can be really instructive and helpful for you in terms of relating to your spouse. And it has some very practical applications, for example, in terms of the way you handle money and the way you relate to money. So if you're not familiar with the DISC profile, and sometimes this is packaged in other ways, like the DISC temperament system has been packaged in a way where there are, they call the DISC, they call it lion, Labrador, otter. Have you guys ever heard that language applied? Well, that's the DISC system, DISC model for understanding temperament and personality. And there are others that have labeled the 4 DISC profiles, amiable and analytical, and again, it's the same 4 quadrants of the DISC system. So DISC is an acronym. People who are dominant Ds, D stands for driver or dominant, I stands for influencers, S stands for stable or steady, and C stands for conscientious or cautious. And so basically, here's sort of the stereotype. And we're all a blend of all 4 of these things, but most of us have one of these things that's dominant and one of these things that's in a strong second, and 2 of them that we tend to be lower in. The typical D driver is the type A, competitive, strong personality person. People who are Ds, that's been called the achiever it's been called the lion in some of these models. But the typical D is the type A driver personality. They tend to be extremely competitive. They want to achieve. They manage, or they measure their progress sort of by their achievement of goals and their status. People with a very, very high D in their temperament profile don't mind conflict. They can be the ones who just sort of engage conflict, and they can butt heads with somebody and walk away and not even think another 5 minutes. It's like it never happened, not even think anything about it. And the other person who, if they've done that with a person who's not a high D, it can take them 2 weeks to get over the conversation. But the high D person doesn't even know that conversation happened. They just didn't think anything about it. They don't shy away from conflict. A lot of high D people tend to be entrepreneurs, or they're high achievers in business or in their professional careers. They don't mind expressing their opinions, and they tend to not seem to care too much about what anybody else thinks about them. And there's a role for that personality. There's a whole lot of stuff that gets done in this world because there are high Ds in this world, and thank God for them. The high Is of the world are influencers. They're outgoing, they're social, they tend to measure their success in life by the levels of acceptance they are achieving. They tend to really engage in social situations. They thrive in social situations. They make good salespeople. They are called influencers because they use those social skills, their charm, their outgoingness to basically influence people and influence the way they think. It's great to have high Is in the world. The high S temperament personality, the steady, stable, they're quiet, they're unflappable, they have grace under pressure, they can look like low energy people, but a lot of times they're a deep well. They don't say a whole lot, but they're great to have around in a crisis. Under pressure, they're the ones who everybody looks to them, and they're the ones who make everybody feel like everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. The world's not coming to an end. The high C's, God bless them. The high conscientious, they're high caring, high cautious. These are people who have a high degree of a sense of conscience about things being done right or wrong. in a high C's world, there's no gray. Everything's black and white. There's the right answer and there's all the wrong answers, and the wrong answers are horrible. They have a high attention to detail. They don't live in a fuzzy world. They live in a precise world. In the high C, they tend to have they measure their success by being competent. They measure their success and their progress by being recognized as being competent and recognized as being accurate. High C's make great accountants. High C's make great engineers. If somebody's got to operate on my spine, I want the highest C person I can find. I want my spine surgeon to take a test and show me that his or her C is super high. If I'm going to ride up in an elevator of a tall building, I want to make sure that elevator has been designed, built, and serviced by people who have high C's. There's no fuzz, no ish. It's everything's very precise, and there's the right way to do it, and it's only going to be done the right way. High C people can be very, as a result of that, can be very cautious and be slow to make decisions, slow to proceed, slow to act, because they want to be absolutely sure that it's being done right. A lot of elbows poking at each other right now in the room as I've described these four temperaments and personality types. And like I say, we're all a blend of these things, but understanding your spouse's temperament is a very useful and important thing, and understanding your own as well. For example, if you're a high D driver person, for example, you have a high tolerance for conflict. You can engage. You want to fight it out. You want to wrestle it out. Let's engage. Let's talk this through. But you're married to somebody with a very low D in their temperament profile, and say maybe they're a high S. That high S, the last thing they want is conflict. High S's seek consensus, and they will walk 3 miles around something to avoid conflict. I'm a high S, and I'm the last person to ever tell you what you don't want to hear. And I'm not the guy who's going to basically, if you've got parsley on your teeth and we're talking, I'm not going to be the one to tell you. We need to get a D over here, and the D will tell you, oh, by the way, you got parsley on your teeth. What's up with that? So if you're a high D married to a low D, maybe a high S, you've got somebody who wants to engage and doesn't mind conflict and doesn't avoid conflict, with somebody who's trying to avoid conflict at all costs. Just will go along to get along. Well, you've got a problem there, because you do need to engage to make good decisions. And we're going to see in the next session, we're going to talk about unity and agreement in marriage. And you're not going to make good decisions with only one person making the decisions, with only one person giving input, with only one person offering a perspective. So if you're in a relationship with a high D and a low D, the high D has got to put a bridle and a bit and some reins around that high D and yank that thing down, and the low D, high S, has got to screw their courage to the sticking place, as Shakespeare said, and work up some backbone and have a discussion and provide some input. This person's got to come up, this person's got to come down, because you understand that about each other, so that you can collaborate and both bring your perspectives and have your and both be better together. If you're a high D married to a high C, conscientious, the high D is going to want to go. Let's make this happen. Let's get this done. This is our task list. This is our objectives as a family. How quickly can we start checking these things off? And if the other person in the marriage, the other partner, is a high C, that person's going to be going, whoa. Hold on just a cotton picking minute here. What about this? And what about this? And what if this happens? And the high D is all gas pedal, and the high C is all brake pedal. and you can't push the brake and the gas at the same time. So if you understand that about each other, you'll understand that about yourself as a D. You know, I will drive us off a cliff unless we have a brake pedal. So I'm thankful for my brake pedal spouse, and I'm going to bring my D to the relationship, but I'm going to submit. Remember Ephesians chapter 5, submit to one another in the reverence for Christ. I'm going to submit my high D achievement-oriented agenda accomplishing self to the caution of the high C. And the high C is going to say, you know, I'm going to submit myself to, because if we're never going to get anywhere. If it's up to me, we're going to move like a glacier, you know, through life. So I'm going to subordinate my C-ness to the D-ness over here as well. And you're going to find a balance because you're submitted to one another in mutual respect, in mutual love, secure in each other's love tanks full, but you understand those things about each other. Money is a huge source of conflict in marriage. It's a huge source of stress. Just the way we manage money, the way we handle money, the way we make financial decisions can create a whole lot of stress in a relationship. And the fact of the matter is that your temperament has everything to do with the way you relate to money and the way you view money. They've been called money languages, and these money languages are an outflow of your primary temperament type. High Ds see money as money equals significance. In other words, money's how we keep score. I'm trying to achieve. I've got these objectives, and so I view money as a measuring stick and as a demonstrator or displayer of my significance, of my achievement. So high Ds tend to like to have to buy things with their money that basically validate and display that achievement or that significance. So if you're a high D, that's the way you're looking at this thing called money. For high Is, money means acceptance. High Is, your highest priority is fitting in and being accepted and being in this social circle. Your greatest fear is social rejection as a high I. And so the way you view money is just a tool to help you gain and manage acceptance. So you'll spend money on things and relate to money in ways that because you're viewing it through that lens. If you're a high S, money equals love. Basically, you want to avoid conflict. You want for everything to be steady and stable and status quo. And so high S's tend to be much more willing to spend money on a vacation that gets the whole family together, that gets all the people we love together, than say some sort of status symbol car. That's where the S will want to funnel available money because that's what money's for to an S. And to a high C, our cautious, careful people, money equals security. We probably don't want to spend the money because if we spend the money, then we don't have the money. So we want to accumulate the money so that we can feel more secure because who knows what's going to happen next. It's a dangerous world out there. Crazy things happen. So that's to the high C person, money equals security. Whenever we counsel couples, we always tell them, there are two kinds of people in the world, savers and spenders. Which one are you? And usually one raises the hand, I'm a saver, and one raises his or her hand, says, I'm the spender. Well, again, there's a place for both. There's a place for spending and there's a place for saving. There's a place for balance in the relationship. And if you're operating in an environment of mutual trust, mutual love, mutual respect, you can balance each other and be better together. These things, by the way, significance, acceptance, love, and security, basically tie to the four things incidentally, that we said that only God can provide. Remember the 4 things only God can provide? He can tell you who you are, acceptance, security, purpose. It's funny, and this is why money is so easily an idol. This is why money, the love of money, can be the root of all evil. Money's not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. But money is always a potential idol because we can always, based on our temperament, be looking to money to provide something that only God can provide. Make sense? Okay. Finally, introverts and extroverts. We kind of all, one of the temperament profiles is introverts and extroverts. And so if you're married to an introvert, and I mentioned this last night, you're exhausted by social interaction and you're recharged by time alone. If you are an extrovert, you're energized by social interaction and you're drained, exhausted by time alone. Opposites attract. I married an extrovert. I'm an introvert. She learned early on to, if from time to time, with me being aware that her primary love language is quality time, if I need to go be alone a little bit every once in a while, if I want to go to Barnes & Noble and just walk around in the book stacks and look at books, she doesn't take that personally. She part of her wanted to at first. If I just wanted to go be alone, first of all, because she couldn't imagine anyone ever wanting to be alone. Who wants to be alone? That's a punishment. For me, it's a reward. There was this eye-opening moment one time in our marriage where I was going to have to drive from Dallas to Houston to see a client, and usually I had my business partner with me, but in this case I was going to have to go alone. So 5 hours in the car down there, meeting, 5 hours in the car back. And she was going, "Oh, you're going alone?" She was going, "Oh, golly, I'm so sorry." And then she looked at me and she goes, "Wait, you're excited, aren't you?" "Yeah, a little." 5 hours alone in the car. To me, I was excited about that opportunity. For her, it sounded like the worst fate it could befall anyone. So we're gonna stop right here. We're gonna talk about unity in the next session. There was one little piece of I wanted to mention here that I didn't get to, so we'll start the next session with that springboards from this understanding of that we're different and understanding those differences. We'll hit that, and then we'll bring it home in the next session. But first, let's pray, and then we'll eat something. Father, thank you for differences. Help us understand how we're different and respect those differences. Like Tracy said last night, to help us not to reject each other's differences or even tolerate each other's differences. Help us in a spirit of love and mutual respect celebrate those differences that you've put in each of us so that we can be that superpower team together. Bless this food in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to Liberty Christian Center's podcast. To partner with this ministry or for any additional information, please visit libertychristiancenter.org.